Thank you, Reverend Glenn. I'm remembering 16 years ago back in the Care Cultural Center. How many of you were at the Care Cultural Center? Yes. Lots of wonderful familiar faces today, and meeting Glenn and participating in the services there. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all today and see so many of you, and I'm looking forward to hugging on all of you when we're complete. I'm really happy about one thing. There's not a clock visible. That means I can talk for as long as I want, right? No clock. I'm off. We may be here through dinner. I hope we can handle it. So I am thrilled to see Les Cool here also. That was a perfect song for my message today. Reverend Jill told me that she's been doing a series based on Disney. Disney talks, Disney movies, Disney themes. And so she sent me a number of possibilities of what I could talk about today. And when I saw them, I wanted to talk about all of them. But I honed in on Peter Pan, just sort of intuitively, like, Peter Pan, I like that one. And it kind of reminded me of Hook. The movie Hook was one of my favorite movies. It still is. Years ago at New Vision Center, we did a series called Movies That Move Us during the summer until we realized we were violating all the copyright laws. Well, who knew, you know? So what? Take Joe to jail. I don't care. Yeah, it was him. He gave me the movies. But I love doing that series because I would get to show one of my favorite things, which is movies. So Hook was one of the ones that we focused on, and I went back and I looked at my notes from that time, and they were good, but I just felt really compelled to continue on with that theme of Peter Pan, and I thought more about the original Disney movie, the cartoon, the animated movie of Peter Pan. And as I was thinking about it, I realized that the very first movie I ever saw in a movie theater was Peter Pan. It was in Salida, Colorado, my little small town where they have one movie theater. And I remember it was a big deal. My mother took me to the movies, and I was completely shocked and enthralled with this big screen and this huge image. And Peter Pan, I didn't even remember that much about the movie itself. I was just so caught up in the colors and the music and the sound, and they didn't even have surround sound back then or anything, but it was still pretty phenomenal. And when I look at the story, I think the story is really relevant for our moments right here and right now. So I'm happy that life guided me to choose Peter Pan. My topic today is using your imagination for good. And it has kind of a double meaning, doesn't it? It's using our imagination to create and generate good in our lives, but it's also using your imagination for good. Like, use it all the time. Recognize that we're using our imagination. And I think right now in our world, we are tempted to use our imagination for bad constantly. Now, I know that living in the times we're living in, we might be tempted to say, these times are more perilous than any other time that humans have faced. I'm not sure I can totally stand behind that, because I think throughout our human history, humanity has been faced in different pockets throughout our history of being faced with their annihilation, being faced with big drama, being faced with violence, being faced with huge, horrible challenges. And we have survived and thrived beyond many of those. And so I do admit and do see that right now with technology, it can appear as though we are more able to completely destroy ourselves than ever before. I get that. And at the same time, I think a huge part of what each one of us has to be responsible for and accountable for like never before is the use of our mind. The use of where we go. Because, as you know, and I have experienced every day, the news media, the information that is available to us now about what might be going on in the world around us constantly wants to show us the little parts where it's bad news and the big parts where it's bad news. I have a colleague right now at Mile High Church, and he is in the news realm. He just recently quit. He's an anchor on a local affiliate. And he says to us very clearly that when it comes to the news that comes through the newsroom, they still operate on if it bleeds, it leads. Right? That is the mantra of the news world, as well as the weather. I mean, I think they probably do it here too, but in Denver it's like there's this cute little meme that goes around about a little girl who looks like she's about 3 or 4 years old with a loaf of bread in her arm, and she's running through the streets looking very desperate, and it says, "Oh my God, I think I saw a snowflake," because man, if it's going to snow there, they're like, "You need to stay home, it's going to snow and you're all going to die." And it's like, people panic and they go to the stores and they buy all the food, and then we sit there and go, "Oh, pretty snow, that's nice, let's go to the movies." I mean, it's just really kind of dramatic. And so what can happen if you fall for it, you become part of it. That's the thing that we have to remember as people in this teaching who are endeavoring to practice every day of our life the responsible use of our mind and our thoughts. We have to not fall for it. But it can be difficult, can it? In our own personal lives, as well as the life that we share out there in the bigger realm, it can be difficult not to myopically focus upon what's not going well, what hurts, what isn't right, what you wish would be different, where life isn't meeting your expectations, where you wish things would change. That can become our myopic focus, rather than the innocence and the good and the joy. And so I'm here today, and my message today, and I think the message of Peter Pan, it supports us in saying, "Oh, my beloved, there is so much good going on in your life, in my life, in the life we share. Don't forget to turn your attention and your energy towards that." And so some of the things that I see in the theme of Peter Pan that really remind us to do that, is there an earthquake going on or something? Is that one of the first things that we're taught in Peter Pan, if you remember, when Peter comes into the nursery where the kids are, he wants to take them to Neverland, right? He wants them to go with him. But they say, "Oh, we can't fly. We don't know how to fly." And he tells them, "Here's how you fly. You think a happy thought, and then Tinkerbell sprinkles them with pixie dust, and they fly." But he says you have to think a happy thought. So my first point today is you have to think a happy thought. You have to think happy thoughts. This isn't just about a fake sort of, "I'm going to think a happy thought now." This isn't one of those, fake uses of our teaching necessarily. Some people take this teaching and they think that it means that if I'm doing it right, I always have to have a smile on my face and I always have to play nice. It's not really that. I would say that's the surface kindergarten realm of this teaching. The deeper realm that is the true north of this work is, can I look at things that are unpleasant and still find the good behind them? That is true spiritual maturity. It's being able to see the messy part of life and still see behind it, still see to the depths of it, still have a sense of possibility and blessings that could be emerging even from that which I'm seeing. Now, as a minister and a practitioner, I have seen this time and time again as I have watched people walk through some of the most challenging moments that you and I could ever imagine in the realm of human experience. Death, disease, failure, financial ruin, broken, betrayed hearts. And still the people who thrive through that are the people who are totally present to the yuck, totally present to the pain, totally present to the, "This isn't how I thought it was going to be," and yet have in their beingness still that sense of possibility, still that sense of innocence, still that sense that at times can be completely smothered with the yuck, but is still at the core of them that sense that something amazing would emerge out of this. but a recognition that that's the happy thought I have to hold. That is the reality that I have to be with. That is the possibility that I have to lean into. That I can't see it right now. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the outcome is. I don't know what direction my life is going to take me through this little traverse that I'm in. And yet I trust. I trust in not a God out there that says, I like you, so I'm going to be sure you're okay. But I trust in my own spirit, in my own soul, in my own ability to create a life that is powerful and magnificent. That's what I place my trust in. That's the happy thought. And the happy thought comes from that willingness to think and see our thought processes and to watch our emotions and to watch our own beingness. It's about managing our own energy. And what happens is if we don't, we just are all over the place. One day we're happy, one day we're sad. One day the news is good, one day the news is bad. One day information comes our way and we are led around literally by our nose by one of the greatest mistakes that teachers throughout the ages have told us: judge not by appearances. Do not allow the appearances of what seem to be going on to determine your state of being. Rather, be with them, acknowledge them, and manage your own state. This, to me, is how we fly. This is the happy thought. I love Albert Einstein tells us. Hi. Albert Einstein, I didn't bring that one, don't worry. I threw that one in on you. He says, I'm enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. You've probably heard this quote before. Imagination more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. I love this notion because we think if we know what's happening, we can know how to respond. If we know what's happening, we can imagine the possibilities. Because otherwise, we let our imagination run amok. Mark Twain said, I've been through some terrible things in my life, some of which happened. Right? We can go off the deep end with our imagination. So in Peter Pan, they're taught to think a happy thought so that they can fly. And I think that's what we're being invited to do too. We're being invited to be with the challenging times of the now moment in ways that can allow us to expand and fly together. Because I do agree completely with Deepak Chopra, and I've used this many times, is that he says that each one of us is a cell in the body of God. And the real bottom line comes down to, are you a toxic, cancerous cell? Right? Yeah? Or are you one of those healthy, happy, whole cells? And only you can decide that. You know that you're a toxic cell in the body of God if you spend a huge majority of your time being afraid, thinking unhappy, fearful thoughts, worrying and fretting about yourself, your loved ones. And there are things and ways that you can participate in life in a center like this, in classes, and activities, in getting together with other cells in the body of God, and change the resonant field in which you live, move, and have your being. But you have to be willing. And you have to consciously take on the ownership of your thoughts. Some of us, we completely abdicate our power, don't we? Well, it's horrible out there. Have you seen how horrible it is out there? What can we possibly do? And that's really the wrong question. It's an important question. What can I do is an important question. But the more important question is, what can I be? Who can I be in the midst of this? And that's the question that I think all of humanity is being asked. How can I be a cell in the body of God that is healthy, vibrant, whole, powerful, and contributing to the greater possibility that I imagine life could be in the world? And it has to do with, number one, the thoughts and the beingness that we're being. The second thing that I think is really important is that I love the notion of the story and the song that Les just sang about how Peter Pan, his impulse, as well as all the Lost Boys, was all about never growing up. Now, some of you have got that down real good, I know, but yeah. But I'm talking about something else. it was a compulsion that they had to remain young. And as I thought about that, I thought, well, what would that be about? And in fact, in the movie Hook, there's this significant moment, because in the movie Hook, Peter Pan did grow up. And he left the island of Lost Boys, and he goes and he gets married and he has kids, and then he comes back to England to visit Wendy because she's being given an award. And she hasn't seen him for many years. And he says to her that he's in business now, and his son is describing the business and how his dad goes into these companies and he tears them apart and he sells them and sells the parts of the company and does all this stuff. And there's this moment when Wendy looks at him and says, "Peter, you've become a pirate." Right? And that is the energy that pirates are portrayed in the cartoon and in every version. Pirates being people who are mean, who are competitive, who just live for themselves and just do whatever they want, even if it's going to hurt somebody else. They don't think about anybody else. All they think about is themselves. They party a lot. They drink a lot. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that they don't really think about anything except their own pleasure, their own life, and they just take whatever they want regardless of who it belongs to or who it might hurt. And so pirates they're the grown-ups in this story. Whereas Peter and the Lost Boys, they don't want to grow up. And they fashion themselves living a life of adventure, living a life of fun, living a life of being young at heart, like Les sang. So I thought that song was really perfect, because what I'm talking about by inviting us to consider the notion of being more like Peter and not growing up, it's really a distinction between the pirates and Peter. And to ask ourselves, are there places where I'm a pirate? Where I'm so afraid that I hoard energy, I hoard love, I hoard money, or I take things that don't really belong to me. I'm all about, in my relationships, what am I going to get? What am I going to get? What are you going to give me? What are you going to give me? And that energy is part of how we are collectively co-creating a world that we wish was different. And it's going to take a willingness on all of our parts, I think, to connect with that innocence, that original innocence that lives at the soul of each one of us, that makes us young at heart. It has the qualities of awe and wonder and joyousness and fascination and a willingness to be an adventurer in life in every way possible and be this youthful presence. And some of us have set it aside because we feel that the world is constantly giving us a message that we need to be more grown up. We need to be more mature. And so we have a mental equivalent, if you will, of adults as serious, grown up, got a job, got to work, got to get out there and make a difference. And I would say there is a difference between being childish, maybe like Joe Hammer is occasionally. This is one of the greatest benefits of being here, you know. Sit down. Or being childlike. There is a distinction between being childish and childlike. Childlike comes to us when we remember that original innocent place within us that finds all of life fascinating. All of its bits and parts, all of its ups and downs. As a child, even the parts that we weren't too sure about at times could be fascinating to us. We only got scared when someone told us we should be. I remember very clearly my son Jesse, when he was little, watching how he would get adventurous and he would go to do something and he would fall and he might fall down on the ground, and so often he would turn to one of us adults to look at us to kind of gauge how he should react. And if we went, oh, he would like, oh, and if we went, oh, what happened there? He'd be kind of like, well, I hurt my elbow, but it wasn't like a big deal. He was looking for agreement. Should I be scared now? He was looking for agreement. Should this hurt? He was looking for agreement, like, how should I react? Right? That's what children look to adults for. But now we are the adults. Most of us in the room are adults. And now we ourselves have to reclaim in many instances that original innocence. That part of us that says, as I look around the world and everyone else is panicking and freaking out, do I join them? Or do I maintain my sense of awe and wonder about the goodness of life and the possibilities of life? Because that's really what Never Growing Up is about. It's about in that childlike innocence. It's about being willing to be connected to the magic of life and the awe of life and the positive possibilities that can emerge through every dance. It's being willing to be somewhat of an optimist when everyone else is being negative and being afraid. It's being willing to lead by example and lead people into joy and lead people into greater life and lead people into love over and over and over and over again, such that we become a place where that beautiful innocence of life can thrive. And the third thing that I think is really important is that we have to clap if you believe. Remember at the very end of Peter Pan, Tinker Bell has drank a little bit of poison and they think that she's going to die, and they're saying, how do we keep her from perishing? And so they all say, you have to clap. You have to clap. Clap if you believe in Tinkerbell. Clap if you believe. And I remember watching the cartoon on TV as a little kid, clapping. I was like, I believe. I don't want Tink to die. I believe. It was this beautiful, beautiful, joyous invitation to participate. And I think that is the second part to what we have to be about here. We have to be about right now more than ever being this place, being this energy of positivity, possibility, happy thoughts. We have to be that place that ferrets out within us our fear, our own sense of worriedness, and then we have to demonstrate this through our clapping. We have to show that we believe. Ernest Holmes, the founder of this teaching, he was fond for admonishing us by saying to us, it's too tempting just to sit around and talk about all this stuff. It's too tempting to wax eloquent about what you believe. But when you say you believe what you believe, then you have to take steps to demonstrate that. I love that Len is doing the treat and move your feet, because that's a huge part of this movement that life is calling all of us into, to continue to evolve us forward into beneficial presence on this planet, not just being here and taking up space. And so to treat and move our feet means that we have to hold that attitude that there's so much good and possibility that is still happening. I believe in it. I accept it. And then I think you have to be about what I call inspired action, not action that's based on fear. If we react out of fear, oh my God, I better go do something, we become part of the problem. But inspired action is important, that there are some really clear things we can do. So number one, I want all of us to recognize, and this is really important to me right now, that the reality is there's more good news than bad news on our planet. I'm going to say it again, because I hear some of you arguing with me right now in your heads. But there is more good than bad happening on our planet. It's just that when it bleeds, it leads, right? It's just that the news we tend to hear is the bad news. It's just that we're in a political season, and so there's a lot of mudslinging going on that gets put out in the news quite voraciously. Even back in 2011, there was a study that was published out of the Miami Herald, and I thought it was really fascinating. It was called The State of the World 2011. It was published by an international think tank known as the Millennium Project, and they said that here are some of the things that represent good news on the planet. The average life expectancy worldwide rose from 64 years in the mid-1980s to 68 plus years now. Infant mortality worldwide has fallen from nearly 70 deaths per 100,000 people to 40. It's still not great, not perfect, but much lower. Poverty defined by the percentage of people living on less than $1.25 a day fell from 43% in the world's population in the mid-1980s to 23% today. The percentage of the world population with access to water rose from 75% to more than 86%. Secondary school enrollment rose from 45% in the mid-1980s to nearly 70% today. And the number of major armed conflicts that declined from 37 in the middle 1980s to 26 today. But see, the shift that's happened since the mid-1980s, right, is that you could be sitting here being bored with this talk and go onto your phone or your iPad and look up a news story right now, couldn't you? And what is at the top of the news, often unless you choose something different, is the tragedies going on in the world. And so we have to be willing to accept and believe there's more good news that's happening. And if you get caught up in the bad news, here's what I do. You can go to Google and Google in good news stories. And there are news outlets right now that have full sections of news devoted to here are some great things that are going on in the planet. I get to do the announcements every once in a while at my church, at Mile High Church, and I started last week saying that every time I do the announcements, I'm bringing a good news story. And so one of the good news stories I shared last week is that in July, a group of citizens sponsored by their government in India planted like 42 million new trees within 24 hours in India. Yes, million. In a place where there's concern that they're chopping down trees and they're impacting the ecology in a negative way, the citizens and the government said, let's do something about this. Now, was that in the lead news? No, it was not. But it's important for us, if we're getting caught up in, oh my God, to take inspired action and go out and at least neutralize some of the bleed that leads news with a reality check that there are a lot of good things happening on planet Earth. There are a lot of humans who are helping other humans. In the midst of some of the shootings recently of police officers, many stories out in the media of citizens all across our beautiful nation loving on, encountering, creating peace and building bridges around police officers and Black Lives Matters and the police stations and companies doing work in the community. So these stories rise up, but the question becomes, what do you and I pay attention to? So part of inspired action is to go out and be accountable for your own mind and manage your mind by being willing to find and ferret out where good things are happening. Now, it isn't, again, that we deny that there are still some places and pockets and things that we've got to deal with, but you and I can deal with those through the way that we're being. And then a part of inspired action has to do with a phrase that I see bantered about a lot, but I think it's important: what's mine to do? Because there are certain issues on this planet that what's mine to do are to hold high watch, to be in prayer about. And there are certain other issues that what's mine to do might be to go out and volunteer and to be of service, to go out and make a difference through inspired action. Again, it's a very important distinction between inspired action and fear-based action. Oh, I better do something, oh my God! That's not helping, no. But to be in that place that says, what is mine, then powerful experiences that rise out of our own imagination bring us back home to who we really are. I love Lily Tomlin says, sometimes I feel like a figment of my own imagination. She's hilarious. Because I think that we sometimes can be tempted to feel like a figment of our own imagination. And until we can rise forth out of our own inner beingness and figure out where we need to be and what we need to do, we could miss the mark. So Reverend Jill also shared with me that part of what we've been doing in these talks is to have a last slide that says, what is it that we can actually do to practice these? I've woven some of that through this message, but just to bring it home is to, first of all, consciously choose happier thoughts. Consciously choose. Use the power of our mind to think in a different way. To recognize that habitual thinking sometimes gets the hold of us. And how do you change a habit? You interrupt it. You interrupt the pattern. And sometimes even just being willing to think something different rises us forward. Believe a good thought about everyone you encounter. That's clapping, right? Yeah, it's clapping. It's looking at that person who they may be dying right now. Literally, like they may be dying and leaving the planet. They may be dying in that they're negative and disconnected and angry. And you and I choose to be a witness to their magnificence, despite what they're doing and what we're seeing. And if you have a candidate that you dislike, breathe and try this out. A candidate either in the presidential election or in any of the elections going on, I know there's a lot of energy. See, and that appears to tear us apart. One of the things I loved on July 3rd, we did this service in celebration of Independence Day, and my colleague, Reverend Barry, talked about the Founding Fathers and how Jefferson would constantly say that it was ridiculous in his mind that anyone would allow politics to separate them from friends. That the Founding Fathers would argue vehemently on both sides of the political agenda and then walk off and go have dinner together in the pub. And here we are on social media unfriending people because they believe in that person, and I'm going to unfriend them because they don't believe like I believe. That's not the Peter Pan way, my beloveds. Not at all. Yeah, and it's not the Thomas Jefferson way either. It is that, see, the good, happy thought here is we live in a damn free country, right? We live in a country where people can believe what they want to believe. Did I just say damn? Is Jill going to be mad at me about that? Man, we live in a country where we get very passionate about our politics. And it is the game of the faithless, to believe that the president, whomever that is, could so impact your life and my life that we couldn't still be happy, whole, healthy, and thrive. If you believe that, you've got to start practicing this. Because whomever that person is, when it's all said and done, we have the ability, because of our freedom and because of the power of our own mind and our own beingness, to live a joy-filled life regardless of who POTUS is, right? It was the other night. This is silly, but in the middle of the night, I realized suddenly that POTUS stands for President of the United States. And that FLOTUS stands for First Lady. I was like, I'm so smart. I just figured that out. I bet somebody else figured that out before me. But what I know is that I am 50-some years old, and there have been lots of presidents. I've liked many of them, and I've hated many of them. And I've still managed to live a good life. So just give up this notion that person, that is a lack of faith on anyone's part, if they are operating in such a way. But at the same time, inspired action means I go do my part. I go and I pick and I vote and I choose the person that I feel the most resonance with. That's called democracy. And that's called living a free life. Whatever that choice is. And I trust in the process and I trust in the journey. So it's being willing to believe a good thought about everyone that I encounter, even if the person that I encounter is on the absolute opposite end of some spectrum of religion, faith. They're vegetarian and I'm not. I'm a vegetarian and they're not. Sometimes we get pretty fundamentally upset about these issues that separate us. And it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. And if we're doing that, we're part of the problem. If we're doing that, we're part of the energy that is tearing hearts apart. And we've got to stop. We've got to live this disciplined life that allows us to step back in. And for those of you who've known me for years, you know that I'm not going to let a talk go by where I'm not going to tell you to meditate. I'm just not. Because that's how we encounter that original innocence. that original innocence isn't necessarily going to come from looking out at the world and seeing what's going on. It's an inside job. And each one of us is accountable for reestablishing those connections such that we hear the deep voice of that original innocence that is our deepest guide. And that leads me to my last point. Trust your innermost original innocence. My good friend Karen Russo talks all the time about being obedient to that inner voice. And that's part of what we have to do too. When we're faced with things that scare us, that challenge us, we trust that original innocence and we listen to that inner voice of the Most High. These are the things that I think we can be about, that can allow us to use our imagination for good. Let's pray together. Please join me in that sweet, sweet moment where we get a chance to actually embody these truths. And so that is what I begin with. In this prayerful moment, I accept and affirm that there is one life, one power, one presence that moves in and through and as this universe. It is everything and everyone. It is every condition that is taking place. For all of it has arisen through the thought of beings that are God in form. And each one of us represents that presence. Each one of us is that. It is pouring through us. It is living through us. It is expressing through us right here, right now, always and in all ways. And so we joyfully and powerfully take our place in this creative energy that is God. We joyfully take our place and recognize that we are a part of the creative force of this entire universe, that each one of us is that. I am that as I speak this word. Each person within the sound of my voice is that as they hear and agree and connect with this word. And that together we stand at a powerful point in our life right here today. An opportunity for each one of us to deepen in to the co-creative nature of our beingness and to use our power, to use our imagination, to use our thoughts, to use our words, and to use every step of our journey for the good that is God that is seeking expression through us. So I accept and affirm that we are now open, poised, and ready to do and be this, to be and do this, to express fully this truth in every realm of our life. I declare that if there are places in our hearts where we have shut people out, that the energy of life smooths them out. That just like in the movie, we clap our hands and that beautiful fairy dust that is the divine makes that energy even and powerful and filled with love. If there are places where we've been worried or fretting, that we allow this innermost innocence to have its way with us. That we walk forward from this place being a beacon of light, thinking powerful, happy, joy-filled, imaginary possibility thoughts, and standing as witness to this in every realm of our living. I am so grateful. So grateful that this is the truth. And for every person who has placed their name in this ministry of prayer, who works with a practitioner to pray, for every one of our practitioners in this community who do this holy, sacred work, I am so grateful. So grateful. And I release this word now into the action of that universal law, that law that makes it so. We let it be, we let it go, and we say together, and so it is. Amen. Do we sing something now? Les does. Okay.